This is what I figured out. This is what I found out. I talked to one of the grocery distributors. He basically was saying is that they ship a lot of their beer out to like North Carolina. They don't keep it here and then ship it out to where they need. They'll ship it out like at a hub, like we do, or what you would think Memphis is a main hub. Apparently they're not. They're shipping it to North Carolina, and then they just kind of ship it all out. And so in some select areas, of course, it gets
the
bought
distributor
up very
here
quickly.
just isn't carrying it for whatever reason.
They're not on their asses. Is what they're not doing. They had them in Kroger for a while.
Everything's rolling.
I'm gonna tell you what.
All right. Applause.
And we're back.
And we're back.
That's all I've got.
That's perfect. This is Fireside Tats,
And
the premier tattoo improvement podcast on the whole internet.
All the world's internet.
And I don't know what episode this is. Would you have any idea? Anyone?
It's getting close to 60.
Got to be around 60.
Yeah.
Somewhere
58,
around there.
59.
Yeah. I don't know that it even matters at this point that we even announce the number of the episode.
It will when we get to 100.
When we get to it, we need to keep up with it because 100's a big deal.
It's a big one.
Yeah.
Oh, we're going to have one. With the band.
So it's...
by the way, I just saw... if y'all didn't see the last week's Game of Thrones episode, right?
Oh, no. I'm so far behind on Game of Thrones.
Sundays? No. It's got a couple of the guys from Macedon in it. Super excited
really?
about it. Yeah, they die a couple times in it. It's really good.
Huh.
Yeah. So be on the lookout. If you haven't seen it, spoiler,
it's a good
Mastodon, they are some of the wildlings. You're going to love it.
Perfect. That's good to know.
Well, I mean, if you love Mastodon.
I always like to start the show with a tip like that. Yeah. Something. Also something that you helped me to reinforce my idea of was this kind of bro country. I only thought of it today because on the Today Show this morning, bro country music. Because of on the Today Show this morning, some country music like or some radio guy said that all of his stations get better ratings when they cut female artists down to 15% or less. So don't play so many female artists. And of course, a bunch of female artists jumped in on that, and they started calling it on the Today Show bro country. And do you remember we were talking about? I pitched the idea that this is all written by algorithms, where it's just like, because there's a certain cadence, certain melodies. He told me about the video. I hadn't seen that.
Vanessa at the shop showed me it, and that's when I was like, and they had the lyrics, and they sync it so you can really hear like how many of the solo to guitar ratio to the hook and
even the lyrics. That's
and the content of the lyrics. Yeah, it's amazing.
That's what caught my attention on it. Were the lyrics is that I heard something like 6 or 8 songs, and 4 of them talked about a girl in her jeans, and I thought, well, that's really strange.
And that didn't take you very long. What, like an hour or two?
Maybe
3 hours
it was 6 straight songs, and I listened they talked about jeans in the back of a pickup truck or whatever. But they all mentioned jeans, and so that's why I started talking with my uncle about it, and we
girl in the jeans and back of my
right. And so we started talking about how easy it would be just to pick the top 20 songs and then find the most common elements and then start create a program that could just mimic that and make key changes. And then you introduced me to this video where
somebody's already done it. Yeah,
where they lay all the top songs over each other, and
and it's $1 billion industry.
Crazy.
Yeah, country pop. And if you listen to it, that's your own thing. But it's basically like if you like elevator music, if you like that, what is that mainstream? Doesn't bother anything. Doesn't talk about religion. Doesn't talk about politics. Doesn't talk about
religion.
Talking about
the Lord a little bit.
Well, the Lord may say a blessing on your crop, but he didn't really say like, "Hey, change my life" or anything. Yeah. Maybe my girl with the blue jeans has got to like cross on or something, or Jesus loves her, something like that. But it's not, it's not that.
Yeah, it's not overt. All right, well, let's get to tattoo talk.
But wait, I want to add one little thing from last week that I completely forgot to talk about when we were talking about allegories and stuff like that. It's is alchemy. One thing about if you can buy a book on alchemy and see early chemistry experiments that were basically illustrated so that they basically you could get all the raw ingredients out of a experiment by just looking at an illustration. Yeah. And I forgot to mention that some of my tattoos are based on that. Because I think we were talking about so many things. But that's one of those books when we were looking at, if you're looking at signs, symbols, world, religion, stuff like that, definitely pick up an alchemy book. Early chemistry, your alchemical stone, your purification of man.
If you didn't see last week's episode, we talked about shame on you.
Well,
and
it's only been
secondly,
a week.
it's
you can go back and catch up. It's fine.
Yeah,
I'll let you.
It was about allegory and symbolism in tattooing, and using it as an alternative for doing something simple, boring text, something like that.
Well,
like how you
to
can
mix and match, maybe symbol, sign, to get away from having to do so much text in your pieces.
Yeah.
Especially if you just hate doing a lot of text. If you're
Right.
tired of it, find some other ways to make an allegory or some alliteration to other things, and
Right.
you'll have a lot more fun. A lot of symbolism in it. But go back to that episode.
Right.
We talked about it.
We talked about it, Joe. Check out that episode. So this week,
Alchemy. Completely forgot to mention.
that's a good point. I don't know how we missed that, but it's good. I'm glad you thought of it. So this week, we're going to talk about. We've talked a little bit about a tattooer's color palette, and we're actually doing an episode soon with Russ Abbott about the tattooer's palette. Is that what it's called? The color wheel. The Abbott color wheel. And that's going to be a cool little tool that we'll go through with Russ. But so I wanted to preface that with the two of us talking about it because what that color wheel is going to show is it's going to limit your palette to a certain extent, where you don't just have access to every color of the spectrum, because you're going to apply these gamut masks over a color wheel, and it's going to reveal different colors and different values and different hues or whatever that.
And we're basically saying, why would you want to do that?
Yeah, why would you want to do that? Do you want to? Is there an advantage? Especially now, if you're really seasoned and especially if you're a painter, I would say, or if you experiment other things, you probably already know why you might limit your palette. But if you're new, I think there's probably a lot of value in it for several reasons.
Yeah.
Outside of just the reasons that a painter might use.
Well, I think your painterly reasons are probably a lot of the reason why you would use it, because you want to get more probably painterly technique to your work, and so having to mix, say, just a smaller amount of colors. A lot of people would think that's kind of I think if you pick the right colors and you do them with some cool and some warm values, some of the same colors, and mix and match, I think you can get, like I said, it's an exercise. Well, I guess we're going to go into all that. It is. There are many reasons why you would want to do it, and maybe just to make some of your work a little more fun, or if you're not very familiar with like changing colors on a tonal range, it's a good experiment in how to do that.
Yeah. I think for sure one thing it does is it does add some element of harmony or unity to your overall piece. Whenever you limit
absolutely,
it's easier to pull off different atmospheric effects if you're going for that.
When you limit it, you're gonna have more harmony because those colors are gonna be intermixed. They're gonna be complementary. Then you're gonna make your tertiary color. You're going to mix the value. So they're not going to change. You don't have to worry about something clashing with them because they will be very harmonious depending on what you pick.
Yeah. One thing I think that I notice a lot whenever I limit my palette, which I do limit mine quite a bit now, we're saying this in a time that tattooers are putting out photos constantly, and you see these palettes, especially a lot of these portrait artists. And I know we talked with Nick Baxter and Jeff Ensminger about this, about the 15 peaches and 9 reds and all these. It's like, well, what does that really do in the skin? And when younger tattooers see this stuff, I think that they go, oh, I need a lot of color. I need a lot of options. Well, sometimes, especially early on, it's the last thing that you need are options. There's too many other things to try to figure out.
I think some of it is what you just said too. It's like, look, those 15 ranges of peach and pink or whatever, there's very slight mixtures from each other. And that's something that you can easily probably mix on your own.
Right.
You just don't know how to do that yet.
And a lot of those colors have not, the jury's still out on a lot of that stuff because it's still these custom color palettes that are like artist signature palettes, all that stuff that have these subtle shifts.
Some of them are beautiful though.
They are beautiful, but who know, you give these things 5 or 6 years and we'll know. We'll know just how many different peaches actually hold over time and what you can see the difference in.
Probably not
we don't know that right
10,
now, but I'd be surprised if you can see it. But my point was going to be, sorry, I got away from what I was going to say. One thing that I notice when I limit my palette is that instead of constantly muting high key colors, I find myself having to working within a series of muted or subdued tones and having to reach out to make something bright or make something contrast harder. Whereas when I have a ton of options, I'm doing the exact opposite. I'm always trying to find ways to tone things down, or I end up using too many high key colors around each other, which sometimes just makes for a loud kind of crazy looking tattoo. So I think that when you put yourself in the position of reaching out to get higher key colors instead of going the other way where you're trying to constantly mute higher key colors, I think I think it's beneficial. I like it.
Yeah, I think it definitely more and more when you're mixing with, say, subtle tones, you're mixing them down. You're actually canceling a lot of what would be that high key color anyway.
Right.
And so then trying to keep some in your palette a lot of time doesn't make sense. They're like these obvious points that don't make sense with a very subtle tattoo. And so I guess having to push and pull so many times doing that, it really helps just picking probably, we were saying before, mixing out of your yellows to a certain degree, your blues out of a certain degree, your reds out of a certain degree, maybe having a cool and a warm tone that you could mix those and back and forth so you could make your own kind of palette. Just remembering that there are going to be a little more tonal once you start. I think once you start intermixing, you're going to have to change probably what is the tonal mass of how gray they are, how dark they are, depending on how much really subtlety you want in those colors anyway. You're talking about these ones that are like peach, and they're mixed with a lot of white. So you're going to have to remember that some of these, you're going to have to make these varying degrees anyway. You're going to have to learn how to mix probably. Even limiting your palette doesn't mean it makes it easier. It just means that you're going to learn a lot more about mixing.
You'll definitely learn a lot.
And that they will be, like I say, closer in tone, so you won't have to worry about it as much. You're not going to get muddier colors. You're not going to get what I think is, like you said, a lot of high key color if you're mixing them down. And remembering which is going to be the cool, which is going to be the warm, and where to put them maybe.
Right.
A lot of times we talk about how to mix out of just black and white with a couple of colors, with key yellows or something like that. How you can make other colors just by having these beautiful mixtures that I think are just like you said, they're mixing them down tonally, but they're also limiting how much brightness they could get or how much high key contrast they can have.
Yeah.
And so you're definitely going to find there'll be people that do not want that. You're going to have to kind of find that range of people that love these very subtle, muted, but very beautiful, and not awkward. Because I think it said there's not going to be anything that fights each other. You're just going to have to learn how to mix some colors back out of that. Like you said, and maybe pushing them, but it's probably to your advantage at that point because you'll know exactly what that color and how much range you can get out of one of them. Especially if you don't know your colors very well. If you're not very familiar with mixing them, get a lot of little.
Yeah, you'll learn really quickly if you're not familiar mixing them. Especially, it's a great reason to use a limited palette. And one thing I find is that you'll find yourself with these colors that you don't even know what they are, especially when you're kind of mixing in the tube, and then you're like, I want it to be a little yellower than that, or a little lighter than that, or a little darker than that, so you just kind of bump white, you do this, and suddenly you have this thing in your tube that's just turning into something really nice, but you couldn't have gotten it out of a tube, or you wouldn't have known you wanted it out of a tube because the tattoo has kind of evolved in that direction, and that's where I think you get a lot of unity and harmony with it.
But I hope that people if you see sometimes if you're working through a piece where those colors do mix in there, sometimes you're getting these residual colors where they're really making a beautiful color in between that. It's go ahead and try to mix that color. Don't take an extra step, and like you said, you found it, you're going to need some of that tone. Go ahead and mix you some of that. See if it's not an accident you're making that in the tube. Go ahead and mix you a little bit and get really comfortable with that color and do it then. I mean, it sounds crazy, but mix you a lot of color out. We've said before, it's if when you're making it, if you're going to keep in a tonal range, go ahead and mix enough up that it matters so that you can see the difference.
So by mixing up, you're talking about you have just a limited set of inks pots. And you're mixing two of your inks together.
Right.
So you're still using a limited palette, but you're creating these secondaries and things out of those that.
And I guess we're not even really saying how many colors do you really limit yourself to? Because we definitely there's a lot of we've seen a lot of tattoos that use every color in their book, and it's just bright, I mean, I'm not saying rainbow, but there's a lot of contrast to it, and it doesn't really play with the eye very well.
It doesn't.
Or you want something subtle, you want something unique, you want something that's, like I said, a little subdued, but has a lot of harmony. Definitely a limited color palette, and like I said, working in the right ranges. Don't just throw out every color, but you'll be more familiar with
probably
those
want
colors.
to, if you're limiting your palette, you probably want, the primaries. You'd like to have red, blue, and yellow, black and white probably. And then you can, obviously you can throw a green in there if you want. And then you could change, if there's a really nice royal blue you like, and there's a light blue you like, I think that's fine to reach out a little bit and find a couple of blues or a couple of reds. I'll tell you what, a palette I use a lot.
I would be like a cool red, maybe a warm red. Like a cool blue and a warm blue.
Right.
Maybe, like I said, your yellow, that's a little harder because you probably have to mix those.
Probably one
black,
yellow is
white.
fine. And honestly, one of those like bright, like lipstick red or those really red, one of those, if you just get that in a black or that in a brown and a black, you can make as many reds as you want. You really don't have to set out a lot of those colors. Yellow is the same way. What Casey Baugh taught me at his workshop, or his palette that he uses, is black and white, and then a dark, medium, and light blue, red, and yellow. So he has a dark kind of ultramarine. Right. He has kind of a medium blue, and then a light king's blue, and then same thing with his reds. And so he's mixing these things down. He's just got.
It sounds like it's a cool and a warm.
Right.
Cool and warm.
So what he's thinking, though, a lot of times whenever I brought it up cool, warm, he's like, I don't even think of it that way. He's like, the way I think of it is like, is it lighter or darker than that? Is it more yellow than that? Is it more red than that? Is it more blue than that? And then he's like, and then I just grab like, well, it's more blue and it's lighter. So I go to my light blue and I mix right on the palette. He's like, so I that way I can determine if it's more red, blue, or yellow, or if it's lighter or darker. And that's why he has a medium, dark, and a light of every of those three colors. And then it's almost like systematically that he's doing that. I don't set it up that way. My tattoo palette's gotten even more limited than that, but that's the way I've been setting up my painter's palette, and I kind of like it. My tattoo palette, though, I've really limited even more. I don't have 3 blues. I use 1 red.
Yeah. One red.
No, that's not true. We've got that dark red now. It's kind of a brick red. I use that a lot. I use that and a really red.
Yeah, and we've got a brighter red that's kind of nice now. That's called lipstick red. That's got a little more orange to it. I've been using that a lot.
That one's really nice too.
The other day I did a black and gray piece where I was just trying to push some of the tone that he already had in there, like as part of a cover up, and just using sometimes like a cool gray and a warm gray on a black and gray palette, just as a trying to get a little more like. I get a little more dimension out of it, a little more tone of mass, and a little more play off of a skin tone. Where especially.
So how are you mixing that down when you do that?
Well, I was using like some of those off colors that are already like smoke, or then basically moving my cool grays with a little touch of blue back into it, and then on the same side, using one that had just a touch of brown, like a clay color, a clay gray, when it's closer to the skin tone. And
you were using pre-mixed colors, but you could easily have mixed that with black, white, red, and blue, or whatever.
Exactly. And so it's even if you said even in your black and gray work, I think you can get away with trying to play with just a little bit of tinting, just to, like I said, it's still a limited color palette, but it really will help you kind of, like I said, if you want to get a little more dimension out of your gray work, how to get just a little more. And
it's a good idea. I haven't done it.
Yeah,
it's
I was going to say it helps for people that still want like a solid fill without having to leave a ton of skin tone. Where you go back and you're punching white highlights and making those little, say. I guess it would be almost like little translucent points in this one tattoo. But
another thing that I see one person in particular doing, actually a couple of people I've noticed now that's very similar to that, is their Emily Rose Murray. Do you know her? She's either
no.
I forget if she's Australian or English, but she does a lot of really kind of high contrast black and gray, and then she does like a black and gray wash tattoo, and then finds strategic places to lay a filled like a color gray, like a smoke or whatever.
Right.
So it might be a woman's head and all the hair's in black and gray, and half of the shading is, and then the part that's in the light, she really paints an opaque gray over it, like instead of using a wash. It's really a nice contrast. It looks really good.
Yeah, I think I've seen a couple of what people call like watercolor tattoos now that have that same effect as trying to.
Fly on your head.
Oh, thanks. Okay. Is basically trying to push and pull what are easy tones that you could do in watercolor or gouache and stuff.
Start over. I was.
Oh, it's just looking at some tattoos that basically are almost like watercolor tattoos now, where they'll often use these gray, these really subdued and very. I think that you're kind of on tertiary, very neutralized color, and you can get away with a lot of that in your limited palette if you try to play with just a couple of what we're talking about is less than 5-6 colors.
Yeah.
And then a lot of black and white.
Yeah.
When it's also a little faster, you'll find yourself not having to, like I said, worry about like what all the other colors should be if you limit your palette,
I think one of the biggest problems with getting out I've had painting teachers that said you should get out all the colors, all your paints, because you won't use them if you don't get them out. And I guess there's some sense to that. But then I find myself feeling like I have to use them. Like I didn't, like I got it out. I don't want to waste it. I should use it. And it doesn't belong in everything. So you end up making a mess. One thing that another benefit to, I think, limiting your palette is if you're like the two of us and you work on a lot of big pieces, and sometimes you go sometimes a single piece might go 8 months, a year, 2 years, however long. If you know the colors that you're using on a regular basis, it's so much easier to get back to that place. Yeah. Whereas when I used to try to push and use all the colors I could, I would be like, oh God, that's that whatever green. We don't have that anymore. And then I'm trying to figure out how to mix it which you can still do. But when you've been using a limited palette and you've used it for this period of time, you're like, okay, the last time I worked on this, I used this set of colors. Right. One less decision I have to make. I get those colors out and I can make all those colors in that tattoo.
Yeah, definitely very, very helpful. And, if you don't color, some people don't, probably write down what colors they're using. And that really helps to a certain extent too. If you start doing it, you'll know exactly what color it is, because you'll be, if you're mixing it over and over and you're have to mixing it to a certain point, you'll know what color that is. You won't have to worry about it. If it's coming out of the bottle too, what you're often getting, like you said, unless you're getting these kind of designer made colors now, which some of them I do love, I have to admit.
There are some really nice ones, but I think they're dangerous to feel like you have to use them all.
If you don't know how to get back up to that color, if you don't know how to actually make that color, I think you're doing yourself a little bit of disservice. Once you see it and you've used it and you know how it works in the skin, you're comfortable with it, hopefully you'll drop back to, like I said, how do you make that color? How would you make that color? Can you make it a little more original? And you'll see people that'll be like, wow, I love that color, because they saw you mix it right in front of them too. Custom color is really nice.
The reason that those custom, the reason that those palettes, not the custom colors, but the custom palettes that are set out in all these artists' names, the reason those colors even exist is because those tattooers or those painters or whoever were mixing that, and they mixed it to the point that they just made a tube of it.
Right.
And so you'll find that you will, if you limit your palette, you'll find something that you go to a lot that's some crazy mixture. And then if you can find a tube that mimics it, well, by all means, go ahead and use it. But at least you know why you're using it at that point.
Yeah, I think but isn't that why the color that he's making the color wheel is to give you an idea of like, of what these colors, when they're mixed to a certain degree, will make these colors, and hopefully those will help you push the palette. But also, again, limit yourself. You'll see these couple colors that's all you need. Like, these are beautiful tones. I can use them with each other over and over and over again. But to try to get you maybe more comfortable, it's like building up your values, building up your contrast in those ways, and being really. I said, not having to worry about putting every color in there, where you're really just worrying about, again, the really important things instead of all the kind of trivial stuff around it. Like, do I need that color? Do I need that, hyper pink or that other whatever, like guacamole green or that whatever the fuck,
Yeah, you can always make You can always make a better guacamole green.
You can, absolutely.
There's no store-made guacamole green that mimics.
A little time, little patience. Exactly. You're going to make a better one because it'll be your guacamole green.
And one thing about, I know for some people it's probably a little intimidating to think about doing all this mixing in the tube, especially if they're not really experienced. I apologize to everyone. We forgot to turn our air conditioner off. So if you're hearing this cut on and off, then
it's
sorry.
Hot in Memphis, though.
It's hot, though. We need it. But if you're, I lost my train of thought. If you are,
Well, I'd say if you're mixing a lot at home, if you're trying to, put a palette together, I don't know where you would start. I would think that if you're not used to like buying a bunch of colors, don't buy a couple, mix out of those. If you're just now like buying a set of ink, that's kind of the probably a nice thing about it too. It's a little cheaper.
Yeah.
Like limit your cost at first,
Yeah.
Buy a couple that you really like.
That's a good point. I didn't even think of it that way.
Use those.
Yeah. What I was going to say, I just thought of it again. Sorry about that. People will be intimidated, especially early on, with the idea of trying to like mix colors in the tube and then match that color again when they work on it the second or third time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really have to be as perfect as you think it does. Right. You'll get close, and then you can blend the old color into the new color, the new color into the old color.
That's what I always say.
And you'll actually end up with something more interesting because it will be more painterly that way. It may not be the exact mint green that was in it the first time, but it'll be close enough. And the way that you blend it in, especially if you sculpt it a little bit, you'll actually make a nicer area of that tattoo by trying to mix that color over and over. And you will get so good at it that you can pretty much mix it.
That's a great point, especially depending on how much you're making. If you're getting really used to using that color, every color you make is something that if it's a little darker, you're blending those places you want it a little darker. If it's a little lighter, you'll blend in those places. You can really push it at that point and make it. I'd say make it your color, but you'll know that color. Let me tell you, you mix that same color,
you'll
100 times. Pick a month or two to try to really limit your palette and see what it does for you.
Yeah.
See if it'll push your design. I promise you, it'll push your eye on that contrast.
Right.
It'll push your eye on like having things like a tonal structure to the overall tattoo.
Yeah. It'll force you to reach for higher key colors because you'll end up naturally muting colors, and it always makes something that's more unified, and it keeps you from trying to use when you get out 15 high key colors, you try to use them all, and the thing that's so easy to forget is that you can have a bright red and then you go to and you lay a bright blue against it and you think, oh well, that's it they're separated because one's red and one's blue, but they're the exact same value and the eye reads it that way. If you put them on a copier and made a black and white copy, they would be the exact same gray, in a lot of cases. And you're not thinking about that whenever you're changing temperature, but your eye perceives it in different ways. And it doesn't matter the difference in temperature. If you are using a bright blue and a bright red, and they're both really high key, they're going to compete with each other. You won't know what to look at. So when you limit yourself, you find it's harder to do that.
It's much harder, and that may be one of the reasons why, if you're looking into your own work and you're seeing what are glaring obvious problems, like, well, why don't these two colors work together? It's a good idea. It's like, wow, well, maybe I should do something, neutralize one or the other, neutralize them both, see why they're really affecting each other, and that may be something that you have to do sometimes. The client that gets that tattoo, he may think it's fine. It's something that usually it's going to bug you. You're going to see something.
You're the artist.
That's bugging the crap. Well, unless somebody else tells you, it's like, wow, when you've got all these bombastic colors fighting each other, it looks like a train wreck, and everyone knows it.
No matter how clean it is.
Right.
And people even that aren't educated in that way will know they'll know it's not as good as one that doesn't do that.
Right.
They won't know why, but they'll know that. And traditional Americana kind of tattooing is a perfect example of it, because so many people do it, and you see so many traditional tattoos that you just kind of go, bah, that's no good. And you see others that are really powerful. They look great. And that's because, for one thing, that's because they push contrast so hard. And for another thing, they know which high key color they want to push, and they know where to put them. So if they have multiple high key colors, they're separating them by contrast, and they're not laid against each other. Yeah.
That's actually a good place to actually see it, especially some of the old school work, is because there were very few colors, and you had a very limited palette. And so if you think about like some of the old school flash, that's a perfect example. You can only go so far with it. You can only mute so many tones, but it's when they started mixing back and forth and muting some of them, you get some beautiful color that even back in the day could, like I said, high impact, where it leads your eye in the right places. And that may be another thing. They said how to make your work, just push it to that next little level. I guess that's really what we're saying. It's
that's
like
really
how to
what we're talking
experiment
about,
without making it look like just this vomitous whatever. I've seen definitely where you're putting so many colors in, where you're putting like pinks against like seafoam or mint greens, and against magentas, against whatever. It's like you make this candy whatever too bright. Some people I think can push that, and it gets a little old. I think you can only get so much high key color in there, where if it were just subdued a little in the right places, you might have a beautiful piece.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in that stuff, and I think we always push. And
riotous color, riotous.
Yeah, riotous. We always push looking at your healed work and seeing work as it ages. If you have that luxury of like seeing the same clients come back over and over, pay attention. That's one thing you should really be looking at, and you will notice that if you tried to push all these subtle unrelated colors or however or even bright colors, you'll notice how little they actually hold. The simpler the better is all it really. I mean, I love doing fancy little things, not as much as you, but really when you're trying to mix 15 colors into one gradation and to turn some corner, it just doesn't matter in 5 years.
Right.
It was a waste of time.
And that may be true in almost any tattoo, unless you're doing some crazy aquatic underwater where there's a million different colors. It's all dappled and whatever. You rarely find that in nature. You really do find very subtle color. It's not a riot every time. Not every object is fighting for attention.
Yeah.
That is probably why it's really easy to see those tattoos that are like that.
Absolutely.
While they're trying to fight their way off the skin.
Yeah. Have we said it all? Is it time to eat
I
food?
think, like I said, it's quicker, just limiting your palette. It's cheaper, limiting your palette. You're going to find more harmonious, tonal
cohesion.
You're going to find better ways to even probably lay that tattoo out once you've seen some cools and some darks.
Educate yourself on what colors do when mixed together. You can take every color theory class in the world, but none of them will match up to actually mixing colors over and over and seeing what they look like and what they do. And that's how the best artists in the world get to be the best artists in the world.
And start on a limited base, because if you just go hog wild, there's so many colors, you could just be mixing for days. Just try it with a limited palette. Try those easy to get colors and easy to mix colors. If you get comfortable with that, then expand your palette in different ways. Add another color. Add another set of colors.
Yeah.
And it'll just get easier and
absolutely
funner. And hopefully
even more funner.
Well, I mean, I hope that I don't think that most people, like you said, when you want some subtlety, when you want some, a little beauty to it, you just don't have like a riot going on, a riot of color going on.
Absolutely.
Learn to mix some color, and that may be the main thing. Learn to mix some color.
And it's easier with fewer colors. This episode is in the books. Check out, it'll be out by the time this is going, tattoo.
Are you going to show them your new tattoo?
No, I'm not. Check out Tattoo Troubleshooting. It is it's like a 13-point guide, questions to ask yourself when designing a tattoo, when doing a tattoo, after you've finished a tattoo. And it's just stuff that I threw together that I thought would be simple questions that you could ask yourself to make your tattoos better.
I don't have anything to do with it, so
David didn't have anything to do with it. David's going to write his own. It's going to be, instead of 13 points, it's going to be 213 points.
No, I'm sure it'll be less than that. It'll be 5.
5 points. A
do
to
you
B.
have the balls for it?
We should do one. You should do one. A to B.
Well, I do think that they're, Did you put that in there?
I didn't. I didn't.
Damn.
It's not a technical guide. It's more of the...
That should be part of my Bible when I write it.
Yours should be more on the technical side. Mine's more on the... more, I don't know.
We will, I have been trying to write down some of the things that I'm doing with Jim just to
we have a new
start
apprentice.
what would be maybe like how you would start an apprenticeship, some of the things that we're working on.
That's a great idea.
He's actually out of town until Thursday, so he's got a lot
Nothing this week.
He's got a lot
I
of
want to try to
homework
record some of that and do. So we luckily have, for people that are just that didn't know, we luckily have a new apprentice, or David has a new apprentice, and I'm going to try to get up there when I can and kind of record and go through a little bit of the process, so you can watch an apprentice go through what they go through.
Sweat bullets.
Yeah, and this guy can draw. He's very personable.
He's very personable.
Good guy, seems like.
Jimmy Tight Pants.
Jimmy Tight Pants.
I don't know if that's a real name, but it seems weird. How do you make your cashier's check out to Jimmy Hot Pants?
Yep. You guys have a good night. This one's in the books. We're grilling. We're grilling burgers.
Problems? Hey, thumbs up. Like us on all the social mediums. Well, I know
Thank
meteors.
you.
I know
Meteors.
But just in case, psychic, anything, kind of telegram,
send us some questions.
All the good love.
We've gotten so many nice YouTube comments lately. Thank you guys for all the fantastic comments.
And that, but Founders in a can. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but
pick it up
all day. You can drink that.
You can drink it all day.
And let's go grill some stuff.
Good night.
Thanks, you guys.